Welcome to Ohio Stadium, home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. And tonight, the site of the Buckeyes' second game of the 2024 season, hosting the Western Michigan Broncos. I'm Tom Orr of BuckeyeHuddle.com, joined by Tony Gerdeman, coincidentally also of BuckeyeHuddle.com. That worked out great, Tony.
That's good.
Boy, before we get to the game, can we just talk about the weather for a minute? People love, Tony, people love to talk about the weather, especially on days like this.
Yeah, it's perfect. It was a little breezy coming in, but the wind will die down. It's not like it's windy.
Yeah.
When I say breezy, I just had to hold my credential down so I don't get smacked in the face. Other than that, it's coolish. It is currently 67 degrees. It's going to dip down into the 50s and perhaps a little bit lower than that. But it's early to be like this. This is October weather. Getting it in September, I'm not going to complain about it because it's going to be back up to 90 later in the week. So. This is nice.
Yeah, this is perfect football weather. We are definitely getting a game in mid-October where it's going to be 97 degrees for some stupid reason. Like, you don't get the great weather for every game.
It's going to be cramping up.
Raining sideways, yeah. You don't get the great football weather that many times on fall football Saturdays. We got it today. If you are out and about in Columbus, you should be enjoying this because you do not get very many of these during the course of a year. You don't get very many Ohio State football games at all during the course of a typical year.
True.
Really, only a couple, a handful and a half or so. So this is, while I'm sure there is not a ton of excitement and hype around the Western Michigan game, you don't get very many of these. Once again, you should enjoy these because they don't come around very often. Buckeyes a 8-ish point favorite. So this is another one where you're going to learn some things about Ohio State, but I never want to draw too many real deep conclusions from a game like this, because if Ohio State comes out and puts up 50 points and wins by 50, it's like, great. Okay, what did we learn for the Oregon game? Probably not that much. And if Ohio State comes out and has another sluggish first half, does that mean that they're doomed to sluggish first halves for the rest of eternity? Probably not.
I think Penn State learned a lot from their game against Bowling Green. You learn where the weak spots are, that you get those things confirmed 50-0. It's like you've done what you're supposed to do. What did you learn from it? I don't know, because I knew all the answers. Like, what kind of test was this? So we'll see what happens. I am interested to see Quinshon Judkins getting back to form. Now, I will tell you this time, when I say getting back to form, it's been 6 games since he's averaged over 4.5 yards per carry. So he averaged 4.3 all year last year, which is not very good. It's certainly much worse than his 5.7 as a true freshman. So I would like to see him get back to, I guess, his freshman form, because Ohio State will need that as the season goes on. I'm also, while we're talking about the running game, Travion Henderson looked really, really good, really consistent. 8 yards a carry with a long of 21, so he was chunk. I think today, I should have thrown it in a bold prediction. It sure feels like he's due for a long one.
Yeah, he when he's healthy, looks one way, and then when he gets banged up, he looks a different way, and everyone goes, "Oh, Travion Henderson, he's not as good as you think he is." It's like, no, he's not healthy right now. When he's healthy, he hits those holes. He gets upfield. He makes big plays, and he's very consistent. He breaks tackles when he's healthy, and a lot of times he doesn't when he's not. And that's so. If he's healthy, you can expect probably some decent numbers from him later on tonight. Something that might help with that, of course, is the potential return of Donovan Jackson. Now, of course, this is the time when we tell you about the availability report, and the good news is, he's available. So is Cody Simon. So those are the two big questions on the availability report. Yes, it's not bad. It's not like 6.5 out of 10. Not bad.
It's a record.
But he's available. Is he going to play?
You're asking me?
That's how the format goes.
Yeah. When Ryan Day said that on Wednesday, well, they're practicing. They're still day to day. It's like, come on. So
you answered my question without answering my question.
It just comes down to this. If they're not 100%, don't play them. If they are, play them. Mm-hmm. And so you go through and you see it game day. Now, the fact that I'm sure they're as close to 100% as you can be, it's just like, well, let's see if they've dropped it down to 95 from 100 yesterday. And it's like, well, then we'll weigh it. But I know during the week we're like, if there's any question, don't play. There's no reason to. You don't play this week. You take the week off, and then you get going. But then on the other side of that, if they're ready to go, then why not play?
Well, I don't want to really do this like Talmudic parsing of the availability report, but there is a line on there for game time decision. So it feels like if they're a game time decision, you would say they're a game time decision, but they're available.
Right. Well, and we'll see when they get out there, I don't know, like an hour before kickoff, who's dressed and who's not. And sometimes they'll be out there and they'll just have the jersey and the sweats or whatever. It's like, well, that's that. But sometimes they will also go through some warm-ups to see how they feel. But I think pretty early on, when they do their drills and they've got the first team out there, if we see them with the first team, that's usually a pretty good indicator that they're going to go.
Yeah, generally, if they're doing the same stuff as everyone else and you're there with the ones going to the warm-ups, that tells you something. And if they're not, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. So we'll keep an eye on that.
So the answer is?
Hey, I'm hosting this one. You have to be I have to ask you the question. The answer is we'll find out together a little later on, I guess. I think I'm going to set the over-under on, oh boy, Tony, is the over-under on the number of guys who are going to participate of those guys 0.5 or 1.5? I feel like the most likely number that is going to participate is probably 1, question mark? 1, then 0, then 2, probably. Just that if you're close enough that you're not completely committed to it, given the scheduling setup, it feels like you're more likely to sit than to play with at least one of them.
But if they're practicing,
sure.
Then
we're all practicing in our own way, aren't we, Tony?
And we are all day to day. So I don't want to give out any more answers on this one because I don't know.
Yeah, it feels. I'm gonna say one plays. Which one?
Cody Simon.
Yeah, I would lean towards Cody Simon being more likely to play than Donovan Jackson, but this may all change depending on, someone feels great during warm-up, someone feels, I could sit another week and be okay. If there's any question, they're going to lean towards the side of caution, I'm sure. So if one or both of them is not playing, do not freak out. They are trying to tell you everything is going to be okay.
Correct.
So as far as the rest of the game, I think I'm going to be very interested to watch the Ohio State rushing attack. We saw good stuff out of TreVeyon Henderson. I just want to see the offensive line. Like, can the offensive line move some people? We talked about some missed assignments, talked about some stuff maybe on the edges, on the even wide receivers and tight ends. Just little stuff here and there that needs to get cleaned up. They always say your biggest improvement is week 1 to week 2. I'm interested to see how big of an improvement the Ohio State offensive line has this week.
Yeah, and that's going to go right into Ryan Day wanting a fast start. It's going to be up to the offensive line to get that done. And I know I think I titled one of the more recent Buckeye Weekly episodes, Buckeye's looking for a fast start. And the reply is like, aren't they always? It's like, you know what? This is something that was talked about. Of course they're always looking for a fast start, but they've talked about it this week. Like, no, they're not ever looking. Buckeye's looking for a slow start, want to ease into things, don't want to get too rambunctious. No, of course. But the focus this week, I did wonder, like, knowing that you want to get Will Howard as many snaps as possible and then out. If they win the toss, they generally defer. Do you now get to the point where let's take the ball now, get as many possessions as we can in the first half, and then see what happens there, and just get this offense? You want a fast start, or night game, put the defense out there, let things calm down, get the ball back at like the 45 from a botched punt or something, a 20-yard punt from the nerves or whatever, and then go that way.
I think you probably still lean towards. There's an advantage to kicking it off. There's an advantage to, at home, the crowd can be louder on the first drive. Hey, maybe they're still getting adjusted to the helmet communication. That creates some challenges for them. Defense gets a 3 and out. You get some advantageous field position. It also opens you up to maybe having back-to-back scores in the middle 8, where you score right before halftime and you score again after after halftime. And you can you can put together, you can turn 17-3 into 31-3 real quick in a matter of 5-6 minutes on the game clock. And I don't think you're probably pulling Will Howard in the second quarter tonight anyway. So if everything goes great for Ohio State and they're up 31-3 in the middle of the third quarter, 10 minutes left in the third quarter, something like that, maybe that's where you think about pulling real hard because I'm sure they want to get Devin Brown some more snaps. I'm sure they want to work further down that depth chart in terms of, Julian Sayin question mark is the next one in.
Well, we saw Lincoln Kienholz was in a scout team jersey on Wednesday. I couldn't find Julian Sayin to see if he was in an Ohio State jersey, but I did find that part interesting.
Yeah, that's I think maybe the surest indication that we've gotten that it would be Julian Sayin as a third guy, and it's felt like that has been where things have been trending a good bit, and I'm sure the coaches would love to get Julian Sayin some meaningful snaps. Get some reps on film with him and be able to teach off of that stuff, especially going into the bye week. You've got a week off next week. You would love that. That's a lot of times a week when they're going to maybe give the younger guys some more reps. Let some of the depth develop a little bit more, because this is one of the 2 weeks during the season where you're not in game prep mode. So take advantage of that. Sometimes that's coaches on the road recruiting a little bit, but sometimes that's just get the younger guys more reps. So this would be great to have Julian Sayin reps on film to be able to teach off of.
I'm saying when I'm down there in the final 5 minutes on the field, it's going to be Julian Sayin out there. I think they're going to get to that point. I know we've talked during the week. Western Michigan put up a fight against Wisconsin.
Yep.
I think a lot of people can put up fights against Wisconsin, and I don't think it's going to go well for them next week against Alabama.
Yeah.
So I'm not super sold on Wisconsin right now, but I also think Ohio State. I'm feeling an overwhelming offensive performance. I could be wrong, but I think this week they're looking for a fast start.
They are, in fact, looking for a fast start.
Which is rare.
Well, and they didn't get a fast start last week, but they almost did, because Jeremiah Smith could have taken the first pass of the season for, 60 whatever yards and a touchdown. He could have had 60 yards and 6 points real quick last week. Didn't, but that's just because he, once again, thank you, Peter Gabriel, for the cameo on the. We are spot on our timing on these things.
We're good. Pros.
Jeremiah Smith could have taken that first one, dropped it, had the penalty, and then after that was pretty much what we expected for the rest of the game. I think, we talked about this earlier in the week. You could run that tunnel screen to him again. It's, whether it's in the first drive or a little later on. I think he'd probably come back to that, and they've seen it, but also, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and set the numbers for Jeremiah Smith tonight, and just use what he did last week. I'll set now
6 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Although it's probably have to go 5.5, 92, and then 1.5, because I'm not going to go over 6
catches.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel great about it.
In some ways, Tony, you and I are very different people.
So if we set it now, but maybe 6.5. Let's go 6.5 because
very courageously moving it up after I've told you I'm going over. Thank you.
No, 6.5, 92, and then 1.5. I'm going to go under the 6.5.
Okay.
Now he was targeted 8 or 9 times last week, but he has shown a penchant for dropping the ball. I do you know what? Don't take any unders with him. Just go over. If we're doing 6.5, 92, and 1.5, you've got to start making things more difficult to take overs, because right now he's shown no reason in his one career game.
Right. Well, you saw what you at home saw what we have seen a bunch in practices and scrimmages during the course of the season, the course of the year, going back to the spring. It just feels like he is in a lot of cases going to be the first read. He's going to be someone that, even if he's not the first read, you get to him pretty quickly in the progression. Ross and I were joking about that on a Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode we did that dropped on Friday, and there was a play where Will Howard had, I think, Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith on one side of the field, and Ross was like, well, he kind of locked in on those guys, and I just started laughing. Why wouldn't you lock in on those guys?
So I'll say 7 for 104 and 2 touchdowns.
7 for 104 and 2 touchdowns. Boy, okay, that's. And just to put this in perspective, 104 would be, I think, the 4th highest single game total for a true freshman in Ohio State football history ever since 90. So, those sound shockingly realistic. Honestly,
he's due for no touchdown.
He'll be under one of them. Maybe he might be under two of them. And if he has 5 catches for 85 yards and 1 touchdown, everyone's going to be like, what a disappointment. It's like, well, that's also probably one of the top 10 single-game freshman performances in Ohio State history.
It would be no different than what Cornell Tate or Emeka Egbuka did last week.
Right, yeah.
5 for 62 or 4 for 55. Yeah. Those are going to happen. And
they are going to be looking to throw the ball, spread the ball around a little bit more. I think there was, 1 target for a tight end last week, and it was for Will Kaczmarek, and it was incomplete out of bounds. I think you're probably going to see them try and work the ball to the tight ends a little bit. You don't want to say force the ball to the tight ends, but I think there's going to be some stuff drawn up for the tight ends to just sort of, show that, yes, these are people who are going to be part of the offense as well. Just keep everyone on their toes.
So are you saying 7 for 104 for Will Kaczmarek?
If that's your prediction, okay, but...
Are you going to throw any numbers out on J.J. Smith?
Jeremiah Smith, let's say...
Throw out your hater numbers.
Let's say... What'd you say?
7 for 104.
7.5 for 105.
$1.
2.5 touchdowns.
$1 million. Can I overbid?
Yeah, it feels like we could be looking at a 100-yard game today. And, is it 1 touchdown? Is it 2 touchdowns? There's something in there. I feel like I go into these weeks thinking 2 touchdowns is more likely than 0 touchdowns.
I know.
Which is nuts.
Stupid.
It's nuts because the record for single-season touchdown receptions for Ohio State is, 17?
Yeah.
Something like that, which is slightly over 1 a game. And that's the school record in history. And we're now thinking, well, sure he might get 1, but more likely he's just going to be on pace for breaking the school single-season record by the end of the regular season, let alone whatever comes after that.
Of course, 8 is the freshman record set by Chris Carter.
Yeah,
and
he could be halfway there tonight, which is crazy. So we do need to wrap this up because we will need to get this posted. But let's hit the scores real quick. What did you have?
I went 52-10 Ohio State.
Thank you for your clarification. Yes. I went 42-6 Ohio State. I think that's not necessarily. I think Ohio State's going to have a bunch of empty drives. I think we've just seen a lot of the clock rules limiting the number of possessions. If Ohio State forces a bunch of 3 and outs, that number could get the Ohio State's total might have more to do with how quickly the Ohio State defense gets off the field than how efficient or explosive the Ohio State offense is when they're on the field.
Yeah, and you seem to be implying no defensive touchdowns either.
Well, I don't think you can ever assume a defensive touchdown. It's obviously a possibility, but defensive touchdowns, you sort of have to by default set the over-under at 0.5 because you're not going to score multiple defensive touchdowns every week.
So Lathan Ransom scored last week, along with Gabe Powers. Mm-hmm. One of those guys is more likely than the other to score again this week.
Gabe Powers, yes.
Do you know, and I wrote it this week, and I know you didn't read it, do you know who the last Ohio State Buckeye defensive player was with touchdowns in back-to-back weeks? Defensive touchdowns.
Was it Malik Hooker?
No, he did not do it.
Really?
You've got to go back to 1973, sir.
Wow.
Neil Colsey.
Oh, okay.
Interception returns. He also had a couple of punt returns.
That is a great stat.
Yeah, and I did a lot of research for one little line and something.
That's a great stat. Nice job.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we will be back after the game to break down everything we saw, everything we heard. We'll have live post-game coverage, interviews with Ryan Day, Buckeye players. Usually a coordinator of some sort afterwards. We'll try and get an interview with the Western Michigan head coach afterwards as well. I did some interesting stuff out of Joe Moorhead last week. I'll be interested to see what we get out of Western Michigan side of things this week. And of course, we'll have all the insight and analysis, all that kind of stuff coming for you right after the game at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. So if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you get notified, and make sure, just leave yourself a note. I leave things in my calendar in my phone to remind myself, hey, pick up the dry cleaning or whatever it is. Leave yourself a note for, 10:30 or so.
Yeah.
Turn on the Buckeye Huddle live stream. The guys will probably hop on a little before the game is over. So make sure you hop on before the game is over. That way you're in there. You can leave your questions in there for the guys. They will answer them all for you. YouTube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We will see you after the game. Thank you guys all for joining us. We'll talk to you then.